Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Welcome everybody to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. I'm here with me today, AnnMerle, like AnnMerle the Pearl. And she is a woman who is one of us. She is walking the path of recovery from sugar and food addiction. In 2018, 2019, somewhere in there, she found an online program. She found BLE and got introduced to the whole concept of addiction, food addiction, sugar addiction. And it really clicked. And then she managed to get 2.5 years of back-to-back abstinence until she relapsed. And at which point she had quite a blinding epiphany. Oh, right. I was doing this, white knuckling it. I was doing this as a diet. And eventually, of course, that doesn't sustain itself. So she will share a bit more about her insights with that. Struggled for a bit, back on track. But she's also a woman who's 71 years old. She's actually 100% okay with me telling you her age because she's loud and proud about that, because she's so full of life and is now, because she's sugar flour free, has had the bandwidth, the courage, the strength, the inner resources to launch a dream of hers that she's had for almost 20 years, it's called Fierce Over 50. And it's all about helping women over the age of 50, like reinvent themselves and to move forward into their golden years, truly, having them be golden. So she's also a Reiki master. She's a yoga teacher, multiple certified. She's in multiple other different kinds of programs. And her signature piece is that she's created a program called the Body Vitality Program that she's constantly adding to and evolving. But basically, it's a combination of somatic experiencing work, sounds like a bit of parts work, and then it sounds like some totally unique stuff that AnnMerle does with breath work and about helping women to awaken their wisdom, their intuition, and their capacity for pleasure. Welcome, AnnMerle.
Thank you. And it is the Fierce Over 50 gathering. But what I use in the gathering is the body vitality method. So the program is called the Fierce Over 50 Gathering. And I am so pleased to be here, Florence. And I didn't tell you before, but that's my mother's name. So this is really, this is really fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's start with your story, AnnMerle. I really don't know much about it myself. So where would you like to start?
Well, I will start at the beginning, which for me is year 50, because I was a single mother. I had been a single mother for many, many years. I have two beautiful kids and now many grandchildren. And I was a university professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I was in the English department. I had a lot of responsibility. I was the director of the freshman writing program. So every student that came into the university had to take freshman writing. Some of you may remember that possibly horrible experience. I had to teach and I had to train the TAs who were in graduate school how to teach those courses. And at age 50, I did get married for a second time, and I had been divorced. And I was so struck by how miserable I was in my body, and I didn't quite realize how miserable my mind was. Because the pain was just screaming louder than anything. I woke up and I was stressed up to here. It was a very demanding job. And women are not we just don't always know how to handle these very difficult situations where men are in charge and you are doing your job, and then something happens that just surprises you. Or it may even be as simple as not understanding the culture of the organization. When someone tells jokes and you don't get them, what do you do? So I woke up so many days with a tension headache in the back of my neck. And I had frozen shoulders, low back pain, everything hurt. And I developed neurological problems. I don't know if you folks watching have heard of trigeminal neuralgia, but they were surprised at how young, at about 35, I was diagnosed with it. It is pain running down one side of your face, and it renders you useless.
Mm.
You can't even cry because the tears will set off electric shocks. All my food had to be blended, and this was from stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so at 50, I took my first opening into this world of saying, what am I going to do? I'm newly married. I have two beautiful kids. I have a good job. I want a life. Where is my life? And so I started yoga. In fact, my assistant, Tom, took me to a yoga class. He said, I think if you don't go to this yoga class, I can't be your assistant anymore because I was driving everybody around me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I took my first real breath in that yoga class, and I studied yoga and became an advanced instructor and taught for many years. For 10 or 15 years, I have pictures of myself doing quite advanced poses, because what I didn't know at the time was I was an exhausted achiever. I took yoga and made it into a dissertation for me to write. And everyone said, and I was older than anyone there. And they said, look at her upside down. Look at her twisted like a pretzel. How does she do that? But even after 7 or 8 years of yoga and being certified as a teacher, I had a frozen shoulder, and that was a real wake-up call for me. I thought this was supposed to make me limber and stretch my tight muscles, and here I was crying from the pain that ran down my arm, nerve pain, and I couldn't drive, I couldn't write, I couldn't type. So I moved on, and to some of the kinds of teachings that you taught, that you talked about, Florence, and I began to see now I'll sort of shorten the story a little bit to get to an end point, because I don't want to take all our time with that, but I began to see that it was the stress that was holding me captive. And so I thought, well, I'm going to yoga 3 nights a week. They are 1.5-hour classes. They are extraordinary classes. This was not gym yoga. This was a very, very carefully thought out yoga. But I wasn't hearing the messages because I was so focused on achieving. And at that point, I couldn't. What they were saying was wonderful. And now if I went back, I hear it in a completely different way. So I went on and I began to work with Jill Miller and her myofascial release, which helped me to see how holding stress in your body, what it does to you. And I began to help heal my own trigeminal neuralgia. The doctors, the neurologists wanted to do surgery, and they said, well, but we can't guarantee that half of your face won't droop, and we can't guarantee that it'll work. And we can give you these drugs that made me feel not very good and only masked the pain. So I began using my own breath and my own massage work to heal the trigeminal neuralgia. And I'm not trying to say to anyone that you can easily heal this. It took an entire life reversal process. And then I began to study, and so that in itself is a whole body activity. But what I began to realize is that women our age, we're over 50, and we should be really enjoying life. Most of us have raised our kids. It's true, we may be stuck in sort of that that sandwich between our parents aging and our kids just coming into adulthood. And that's not always pretty on either side. But still, we're 10 or 15 years away from retirement. And this is when things are supposed to happen, especially if you've been an exhausted achiever and you've been putting off that place in your life. And then all of a sudden your body just refuses. The weight piles on. You can't resist the chocolate cake. It just feels like that's the only thing that's going to make you feel better. And so I began to learn that women, and then there's this whole cultural conversation about self-care, which I think is largely a Band-Aid. I think it's largely not getting at the true deep shifts that we need in our lives. It's lovely to have a manicure and pedicure. It's lovely to have a book club with friends. Community is really important. It's lovely to get a massage. I did that myself from 50 to about 65, but the results were gone the next day. So what I began to realize is that what is required here is agency. We've been so good at taking charge of our whole lives and succeeding, but now we need to do things in I might have to say kind of a bad word here, in kind of what might seem like an ass backwards way. We have to take charge of our own self-care, which means asking our bodies what we need, coming inside deeply and saying, neck, why are you so stiff? If it isn't, or the question is, okay, my muscles are tight. Okay, I believe all the prescriptions that say I am stuck in stress. And I asked my current teacher, Anahita June, I said, well, what is stress? So we know that tight muscles are a symptom of stress, or maybe weight gain and inability to manage our eating is a symptom of stress. And we know that headaches are a symptom of stress. But what is stress? And she just has this amazing way of simplifying things. And she said, stress is not saying yes to yourself. I just had to take a deep breath on that one. Because what are you doing? Leaning over a keyboard, scrolling on your phone, being completely sort of numbed out by society's demands on us. What are you not saying no to? That's scary. What are you not saying no to? And I think, Florence, that now that you mention it, that my relapse was kind of the juncture where I finally found the ability to ask myself, what am I saying yes to? How do I say yes to myself? And how do I say no to, how do I start saying no to what I don't want? And you'd think we've come so far after all the women's liberation work we've done, all the job work to get our pay equal, and I still can't say yes to my inner self.
Amazing. I so resonate with that. And I know that even in my current life, there's times where I feel like I'm pushing because I think, but this would be good for the group. But there's a little voice inside that's saying that's too much for me. And often I will say, all right, well, let's dig deep. Let's just because this will be really good. This will be really good to get done for them. Right. And so I suppose there's times when we dig deep and we sort of, we self-sacrifice a little, but yeah, as a day-to-day sort of MO, that's no good. We're gonna wind up in the pantry.
But it's an evolving process, and sometimes we're so impatient with ourselves because we live in a fix-it culture. We have been taught that our bodies are like machines, and I used to be like this myself. If something hurt, I found a recommendation for the best chiropractor. I found the recommendation for the best massage therapist. I took a supplement. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. I'm saying that you have to really ask yourself, what can I do for myself so that I meet this person with an understanding of, well, this is really where my neck hurts. And I've been wondering if I took on one too many writing projects and that's the problem. That's the deeper problem, as you say. And so it's creating this sense of agency in your own body for your own self that you bring to the medical caretakers that you need.
Totally. Yes. I'm assuming, maybe not. Are you familiar with Sarno?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
TMS, because this
Absolutely.
is all
Yes,
TMS, isn't it? Yes.
yes,
And
yes.
have you seen the new documentary out on him?
No, I will have to look
It's
because
called
I
All
think
the
he's
Rage.
exactly right.
All the
Yeah,
Rage. Yes,
yeah.
yes. I can hear the parallels, the
He saw that when he educated people about what was going on in their lives, their back pain disappeared.
yes.
But for some reason, he was not heard the way I would have expected him to be heard. I mean, a small group of people understood and were huge fans. And I read his book. I was actually suffering with trigeminal neuralgia. It was an episode that really took me out of life for about 3 months.
Mm.
And I ordered the hardback book. I can't remember which one it was, but it was really where he went through more of a history. It was not his program of
Yeah, it
back-related
was the
care.
Mind Body Connection book.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was laying on the sofa and I was so sad and so depressed. And I said, well, I'm just going to look at the index and see if he mentions trigeminal neuralgia because that was on the top of my mind. And there it was.
It was there.
And I turned to that page. I think it was like maybe page 30 that's coming to mind. And he was citing Alfred Adler, a psychologist, who said that this nerve pain comes from internalized rage. And I was still very new to this. And I get chills just saying it. I had to go, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? And I really had to breathe into that and think, oh, what might I be angry about? What? So many things. Challenges at my work, challenges in my first marriage, challenges as a very young infant, the adverse childhood experiences that we're all being educated about.
Mm-hmm.
I was just telling my group the other night that often women our age don't feel safe.
Right.
We don't feel safe. And I mean, I'm not a person who grew up in dangerous circumstances. There was always enough food in our house. There was always a sense of stability. But I asked my mother recently, who's 91, she had me when she was 20, so she was quite young. I was the first child. And I said, Mom, did you breastfeed me? And she said, no, that wasn't done back then. We were just told to use formula. And we fed you when they gave me a schedule. And so I thought to myself, I didn't want to make her feel bad. Of course, that's what she was told. She was doing the best she could at the time. I said to myself, well, what if I was hungry and I screamed in between feedings? I wasn't fed. And now why? Whenever I get in a panic, do I want food? Can it be from being months old that I don't have a sense of my body feeling unsafe? And so it translates into a sublimation, kind of a numbness that I try to resolve with food.
Totally.
That's how complex the situation is for us.
Totally is. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's an addiction for some of us.
Yeah.
If we're on that spectrum, not everybody is. But if we're on the spectrum, it's truly an addiction. But underneath is an ocean. And one of the places where I kind of, I would add to Sarno's work is I don't think it's just rage. I think it's grief and fear. For me, I've noticed those three, right, are the
sadness. No, that was what Alfred Adler said about that particular medical
Sarno
piece.
says it's rage. Like he almost always says it's
Oh,
rage.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I think he would
Okay.
almost 99% of the time he says it's internalized rage. And
Okay.
and so I certainly, he invites you to look at, okay, what's this rage about? And he goes, well, if it's on the surface and it's conscious, that's not the kind of rage we're talking about. We're talking about the unconscious stuff, the stuff that you're not aware of, but
Right.
you kind of have some inklings of, and you can kind of explore. But for me, one of the things that I was the most angry about was all the times that I did self-sacrifice. I said no to myself.
Yeah.
Right. I just
Yeah.
kept thinking, oh, come
Yeah.
on, just push through. This is a good thing. And then I resented that I didn't go for a run. I didn't go for my walk in nature. I pushed through on a work project or something.
And that's the story that the women in my realm repeat again and again and again. I could make my body not feel anything to finish a project.
Yes.
I was told in the last, I retired at 62 as a full professor. And I was told by my head in a very caring way, he said, I would love for you to attain the rank of full professor. And if you want that, what you have to do is write a book and publish it that's published by a university press. It's called a scholarly book. It's kind of a genre. And I never thought about it, Florence. I said, yes, okay. I had 2 kids. I was maybe married, but I still thought of myself as a single mother. I still felt very self-responsible about earning a living. And I was living with my husband, and we set up folding tables because we had a full house of kids and a blended family, at least, off and on. It was a full house. And he slept. And at 4 a.m, every morning I got up and I wrote that book. And I was awarded full professor. I published it and I was awarded full professor. But what was the cost of that? What was the cost of that?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens after 50. We start to, and this may be true. I don't mean to discount. Women have come to me at 30 and said, and men have come to me and said, but that's me too.
Yeah.
And it just happens that it's easiest for me to talk to the women who are most like me. But we ask ourselves, we wonder what went wrong. And we've spent so much time traveling that road of doing, achieving, pushing through, numbing.
Giving over. Yeah.
Yeah. That we have no way of asking, how could I undo that? I mean, we go to meditation retreats, and meditation is uniquely challenging for the kind of woman I am, because you are told to sit still and empty your mind. I mean, it's much more sophisticated than that, but it triggers us because we feel so unable to unwind the mechanisms that have brought us forward. Mm-hmm. And you might go to an experience or two, but I have learned that it takes years of devoted attention to yourself to unwind these practices.
Right, right. And in the context of food, food addiction, sugar addiction, and recovery, I recall you saying that I wouldn't have my coaching company. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't got sugar flour free. Say more about that.
There was a lot of talk in the program I was in about now that how much time is it taking up? How much effort is your brain using to think about, I want that peanut butter, I don't want to eat that peanut butter? And that whole discussion, night after night after night, keeps you focused on willpower as the key to putting down the food. And when I really began to learn, especially after I came back from this relapse, that I needed to learn how to pay attention to my inner self. When was I angry? When was I denying my feelings? When was I pushing through? And when was I denying my feelings? And then I began to say, oh, and I began to use some of the strategies that were taught to me in that program, which were kind of easy meditation, guided meditations where someone was talking to you about this. And it now I see that maybe they helped. That was more of a distraction tool. Because what I discovered eventually, and this is hard to explain, so I hope my listeners will be gracious. You have to learn how to listen to the inside of your body. And this is what is coming up in a lot of study in our contemporary culture. Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps the Score, and Stephen Levine has written about trauma. And these approaches, we are traumatized by our addictions. We are experiencing trauma. It can be little t trauma or big T trauma. But if I'm carrying this adverse childhood experience of being hungry into my days, I need very special tools to wake up my body, to unwind and sense where that feeling lives in my body. So the breath work that I teach asks women to breathe into their pelvic floor, to breathe and to be able to find the places in your body where there is tightness and tension. And to ask ourselves, and you mentioned this earlier, what would pleasure feel like for us? We're such hard driving, achievement oriented women that pleasure seems like I would have taken a movie as pleasure. I would have taken, a fancy meal at a restaurant as pleasure. I would have accepted any number of things as pleasure that were external experiences. But how can you grow the ability to feel pleasure inside your body, riding your breath? Riding your breath. And I'll just say one more thing. We're all, the women who I work with, carrying the yoke of fight and flight. Our nervous systems are strung out. It's when you carry that stress for decades, it becomes a new normal. If you see dogs fighting, afterwards they just shake themselves out and it's done for them. And there are some experiences that we can do that with. But most of us have been wearing a suit of armor that's called fight and flight. And our whole body is wrapped in that armor. And so just feeling the pleasure of a breath that travels through your entire core is, the women were telling me, I teach on Wednesday nights, and they were telling me last Wednesday night, I never felt that before. That's new. And so inviting pleasure is really the pinnacle of coming into a body that is not in fight and flight, but has shifted into a parasympathetic rest and digest, tend and befriend place. Oh, can I say one more thing?
Of course. Please.
What we're doing when we do that, we now know, is we are rewiring our brain. Because that fight and flight has left deep grooves in our cognitive apparatus. And so that's why it takes a long time, because we are rewiring. That feeling goes up to our brain, and it says to our insula, it's okay. I will remap your body so that you can feel pleasure.
And it really is remapping. That's a good word. Yeah. It reorganizes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you. I am all over this stuff. This is exactly where I'm at in my own life. So I don't know how much it's making sense to other people, but because I know Porges and Levine and Bessel, and I'm in trauma training, like all that, like I absolutely get. And Sarno and TMS and all this somatic experiencing and all this work is so pleasurable and so exciting and so transformative. And it really isn't work that we can do well or even access when we're still actively in an addiction. That it's when we put the sugar and flour down and we create the vacuum, the need and the motivation to bring in other ways of showing up for ourselves, of being there, and the deep desire to no longer be shut down, to be numbed out, to be cut off, right? That we actually find so much pleasure in the reconnection.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I'll just say also that the vacuum there is literally a vacuum when we learn how to breathe. There's literally a vacuum in our belly that we can then feel. This is this myofascial release work. So it translates from a concept to an actual physiological piece in your body. That's why all of this work is called embodied. And I'm not sure that I call it body centered, but I'm not sure many of the women I talked to initially understand that, because it's hidden from us, that new reality, that new awareness, that pleasure, that opening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love it. Amazing. So is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up today about the topic of sugar addiction recovery, women, pleasure, food?
I've worn myself out. You did a good job of getting me talking, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be here. And if women watching would like to talk more, just get in touch and we can talk about it. So that's
yeah. Right. And for me, the only thing I would like to sort of, because we didn't touch on it and I said we would, was this whole sort of experience that AnnMerle had of 2.5 years of back-to-back abstinence, right? Like,
right.
And I got this. But she was always going to relapse if she was doing it from the place of I'm on a diet. Because when you got to maintenance, right, when you lost your weight, all of a sudden you don't need a diet anymore. So you're like, why am I doing this? Right. And so then of course you're going to fall. And then you kind of have to wrap your head around, no, I need to do this for a reason that is not about health, not about my weight, not about these external wonderful things that are going to come and happen. I'm going to do it for one reason. I have an addiction. That's it. That's the only reason that sticks. This is an addiction for me. I'm going to just end this, put this addiction in remission. And once you put your addiction in remission, I guarantee you cannot know how much good will come into your life and what it will look like. Because did you have any idea 6 years ago that you would have this group, Fierce Over?
I had no idea. And the group is healing me. The group, I don't tell them that. The group is healing me. We are healing each other.
Yes. The co-regulation of community, of people on a path of healing, doing the deep work.
Yeah.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your story, your insights, your journey with us. And thanks everybody for tuning in today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.